Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy, you can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Hello, fans. Before we get into the episode, I want to give you a little background and context. Our guest today, Mackenzie Myatt, is an elite female athlete, an elite cyclist, and also an author and a poet. And this is thanks to the work of Molly Herford and Strong Girl Publishing. We had Molly as a guest in episode 170 back in the spring, and she has a publishing company. She's trying to get more stories out about female athletes. And hey, here we are, a podcast trying to get stories out about female athletes and specifically nutrition, but we're here for all things female athletes. I'm the dietitian. I like to cover the nutrition piece of this, but so amazing to get more stories out, to hear more of the voice and the person behind the athlete. So if you've been following along, like I said, episode 170, we had Molly, the founder of Strong Girl Publishing and an author herself of the Shred Girl series, which are great books for middle school girls to get into biking and cycling. And then we recently had Misha Powell, an Olympian who published her first book, Sprinting Through Setbacks, from the same publishing company. And now, as a guest today, we have Mackenzie, an elite cyclist and poet and published author now with her first book, In Defense of Big Dreams. So I'm here to, we have one guest who then led us to get other guests, and we just want to support all that they're doing, both in competition and outside competition. And I was so thrilled to have all three of these guests come on the show and really talk about their journey as a female athlete, but expand on that, because we all, and I think this is a theme that you will pick up in all three of these episodes, is really that we are so much more than athletes. And with that said, as a dietitian role in here, I usually try and incorporate nutrition. It's a female athlete nutrition podcast, but sometimes we just focus on the female part or the athlete part or just the nutrition part. And my conversation with Mackenzie, we really went a full hour just focusing on her journey as an athlete and a writer and how that, really came together for her. I really loved listening to it for her. It is so much depth in this conversation. And then I nearly forgot how we were supposed to talk about nutrition. So around the hour mark, we actually do shift gears. What's really fun is she had a question for me and about her personal diet. And I thought, hey, let's bring it on the podcast, and almost like a, ask me anything segment of the episode. Obviously, I didn't do a diet analysis. I am not her personal dietitian, so we weren't able to diagnose anything, but kind of fun for you as a listener to hear, hey, here's a question about my diet. And this is kind of, as a dietitian, how I would attack it and start to investigate and see where we can experiment or make improvements. So that's kind of setting the stage for this episode. And before we dive in, I do want to remind you that all of our episodes, besides, listening on your major listening platform, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, they are all hosted on our website, femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com. You can search for past episodes. You can also subscribe to our email list. You can provide a donation and be a supporter of the podcast, because this is a free podcast that I'm trying to keep going for you all. Even if you just donate $1 a month, that is helpful. So please consider supporting the podcast through a financial contribution. You can also get in touch with me and take advantage of many of my discount codes. As a dietitian and a podcast host, this podcast is not sponsored, but I do have discount codes available to you. I do get a small commission, be it 5 or 10%, but you're getting 15 or 20% discount of a product that I'm by no means trying to push on you, but it's available to you if it works for your nutrition, lifestyle, and athletic goals. So be sure to head to femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com to just see what we have available. Okay, let's talk to Mackenzie now. Enjoy. Hi, fans and listeners. It's Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, registered sports dietitian and your host of the podcast. Today, I'm here with Mackenzie Myatt. She is an elite cyclist and author from Nova Scotia, Canada, now living in Atlanta, Georgia. She published her first book, In Defense of Big Dreams, in 2023. She writes about the idiosyncrasies of chasing excellence in sport and in life. For as long as Mackenzie can remember, she has been writing poetry to process the world around her. She describes herself as a pretty shy, anxious kid, and writing was the best way she knew how to express herself. In her teenage years, poetry became a lifeline for all of the things she couldn't say out loud. Now it is the best way she can share all of the things that inspire her. Mackenzie has been active and competitive for as long as she can remember. She was a gymnast for 10 years before she decided to commit to cycling. Her U23 years saw several invitations to national team projects, World Cup projects, World Championships, top 20 performances in Europe, and national championship podiums in Canada and the United States. Collegiate racing gave Mackenzie the perfect environment to practice racing to win, an education, and many cherished memories. She currently races whatever events excite her, no matter the discipline. Mackenzie, we're so excited to have you on our show and introduce you to our guests and hopefully spread the word about your book and have more people read that as well. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I usually like to help our audience get to know you, start each conversation with just kind of your journey to sport and cycling, which, is presently your current sport, but you started as a gymnast. And I would just love to hear kind of, as you grew up, how you got into sport and what kind of drove you to continue down the path.
Yeah. So I was always really competitive growing up with my brother. He was just about 2 years younger than me. So we were very active. I was into a whole bunch of sports when I was younger. I feel like that's really often the case. Soccer was a big one. So funny, like watching the Olympics and enjoying watching so many different sports that I used to be interested in. And again, gymnastics, a big one, obviously. But yeah, so I was doing gymnastics and we're actually mountain biking also from a pretty young age. And I would the seasons were opposite. So gymnastics is more of like a winter season and mountain biking is more of the summer, fall season. So I kind of did that for a really long time. Neither were super serious. I mean, I think gymnastics was more the focus for a long time. And then what happened was I got to kind of hear this a lot. You're in gymnastics and you turn 16 and you're kind of like, what are we doing here? And I dislocated my elbow doing gymnastics. And that was I really started to think hard about what I was doing after that. And I decided to come back and do one more year just to show myself that I could. And then I was like, okay, I think I'm satisfied with what I've done in gymnastics.
Yeah.
And I wanted to focus on mountain biking and just kind of see where that would go. And the first year, kind of the year after I retired, give that air quotes, retire at 16, that's what they say. So I was able to train on the bike during the winter, like a full winter. And the next summer, I actually qualified for junior world championships in mountain bike.
Wow. So just one full
Yeah.
winter dedication.
Yeah. And I was like, whoa, okay, that was cool. let's keep going. Let's see what I can do with this. And I was hooked with that.
Wow. So awesome just to in a short amount of time, like it's fun and exciting, like, oh, to get that reward and passion for it as well, enjoyment out of it,
Yeah.
to keep going. And, it's, I think at a young age, cycling, I'd love to hear your experiences. My experience is that cycling doesn't seem as popular with the younger, I don't know, it just seems like something that adults get into more. Am I wrong about that or right?
I think it's very difficult to get into cycling unless you have a direct family member who's involved. So for me, it was my dad. My brother was also into it for a while. And we were really lucky. There was another family who lived pretty close that was a brother and sister about the same age and a dad. And we were kind of this like super family unit for many years. And we would go mountain biking together and we would go to the local races. And it was awesome. But what happens is often kids start to drop out about high school. And that's what happened. Like we had actually grown like a pretty big group. We had a group of like 10 kids who were traveling around. And by the time ironically, it was about the same time that I decided to focus on mountain biking. But right after that, everyone else seemed to disappear. And I was by myself. So it was pretty lonely. It's tough if you don't have other kids around you to ride with.
Yeah.
But I luckily, I had gone to Europe for the first time to compete. I went to Andorra, which is an incredible place, sandwiched between France and Spain, this tiny little country in the mountains.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do more of this. I want to travel, So I had that to hold on to. But if you don't have that yet, it's very difficult.
Yeah. Hard to see. Like you need to envision something.
Yeah.
Well, and this might circle, right? I mean, I think about the title of your book. I think is such a wonderful title to draw people in defense of big dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as we were just saying, it's like, it's hard to dream big if you've never even maybe seen it or you don't know those opportunities. And I love too, and I'd love to hear your perspective on choosing this title, but like in defense of it, because we do sometimes have to stand up for our dreams. If they can't be seen, if they can't be visioned, if nobody's ever done it before, or you don't have the support, so it's like, no, we're going to chase after this. We're going to do it. But okay, so I'm jumping ahead here, but what you just said, I was like, ooh, that ties into the title of your book so nicely of,
Mm-hmm.
you got that glimpse of something and then you were saying, I'm going to dream big for this.
Yeah. So, yeah, and we'll end up somewhere else with this, but the title, yeah. So we're talking about a time like I would say like 18 to 22, all throughout my under 23 years. I was on the Canadian national team. I was going to Europe several times a year. I did a few world championships. Motivation was sky high. Like I was, I'm on the train and I'm going up. Like things are awesome. Generally things are really awesome. But the title of the book came right after COVID when I started questioning all of that. And I was like, what am I doing with this sport right now? All of a sudden things stopped working. And I couldn't figure out why. I didn't know why I felt like I sucked all of a sudden. COVID was difficult for so many reasons. Never mind what it does to, a young athlete's career. All of a sudden they can't travel. They have their trajectory interrupted. They're not seeing people, but I felt like it was more than that got interrupted.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know if I wanted to keep racing, if I wanted to quit, basically. I was like, I've been doing the same thing for like 2 years now after COVID, and it's just not working. So, it's not making me happy anymore. I don't know if I want to do this. So the title of the book is related to falling back in love with the sport. Mm-hmm. and changing my perspective of the sport completely, and having it, I was still competitive, but it wasn't so intense. It was much more geared towards having fun.
Yeah.
And it was a big like mindset shift for me that like people say all the time, like, I just want to have fun. And they say like, just have fun, as if it's less, as if like you're not strong and having fun at the same time. Like it's a bit more recreational, especially I think when you've been at the highest level of a sport, to say, you know, fun, like where does that fit? And people talk about, I've heard so many people say, professionals say, like, you know, you have to keep it fun. But what does that actually look like if you have like a really strict training plan, you know, and you're prioritizing training over everything else in your life, which you kind of have to do. And when you're young, you're in high school or you're in college, because I did race in college as well, you know, it kind of takes over everything. And that's one way to do it. And it kind of worked for me for a while, and then it stopped working. So I had to like reconfigure my relationship to the sport and kind of dare to dream again, because I got my heart broken dreaming, you know?
Yeah.
So that's, yeah.
Wow, I'm really resonating. And I don't think I've ever heard somebody express it like that before. But in my experience with athletics, I've never been at the highest level per se, but I grew up playing recreational town league soccer where my dad was my coach, and I was competitive and I wanted to win and I wanted to score and all that. And, you know, he was my coach. So he would give me tips. Okay, focus on this, that. And then he would say, but remember, just have fun. And I used to hate when he said that. Because even though now as a parent myself, like I get it and I agree with him, but I hated it because it felt to me that it was diminishing my competitiveness. And so the way that you just expressed, I'm like, wow, that's the first time I really resonated with somebody like expressing it that way, of why we as athletes sometimes feel like having fun is less than, and it shouldn't be that way. And yet it feels that way. And how can we stay competitive and be at that highest level and fit the fun in? I don't know that there's one answer to that. As you said, you had to find it yourself again and reconfigure your mind to to look at things differently. But
yeah, totally.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I resonate with that a lot, and something to really think on, why our relationship with fun and competitiveness, like we can find a way for it to be the same.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I have a similar experience. I feel like, so my dad coached me in cycling for a long time. And he was also very involved when I was doing gymnastics. Like, you know, he knew everything about what I was doing. We would talk about it. And my mom, she was supportive, but she would say, just have fun. And it would make me so mad too. I would like, I'm not trying to have fun. I'm trying to win.
Right. Winning is fun. I want to win. Yeah. And they're right. Our parents were right. It's important to have fun. As you learned, you had to find fun again after COVID, you know, and getting your heart. That's the other thing too. It's like something that we love so much. You loved sport so much, put so much into it. And then, you know, things happen, whether it be injuries, not our best performances, just getting run down, where whether we fall out of love with the sport or we feel like our hearts get broken by it, you know, because you have that motivation for success and, you know, accomplishments, and then our hearts can get broken. They often do in sport when we don't see the results that we've worked so hard for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'd love to hear from you too, kind of just as we mentioned your bio, writing and poetry specifically has been something that's just been part of your life. It's something you've done to help process. It's been personal to you. And is this book, this is your first book. Have you ever published any of your writing in any other avenues?
Not to this extent, and not at this level with this reach. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, before like Molly and I decided that I would publish a book, like I had just started posting poetry on Instagram, and it was terrifying.
Wow.
That was one of the most scariest things I have ever done. And I have launched myself off of a lot of things on a bike.
And putting, yeah, because writing is so personal, and your type of writing, and like it's very personal. So yeah, scary. That's why I asked that question of like, is this the first time it's really been published on a big level?
Yeah.
So that's one of the scariest things.
Yes, I was freaking out after I posted the first one, just wondering what people would say, because you're right, it is so personal. And there's a lot of people that knew me and knew me as a cyclist, but did not know that I wrote like this or that I thought like this, because I'm a very quiet person. I'm shy. Even now I'm 26 years old. I'm like, I would rather only talk to one person at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a lot of things that I think that I don't say.
Yeah.
So this is like, a lot of things that, I've only ever vocalized with family, probably just family, like not even very many friends, because cycling is like the lifestyle that I had for so long was very. I've heard a lot of professional cyclists talk about the life of being a professional cyclist is very narrow. Like, you live a very narrow life. You do one thing and you do that thing almost 99% of the time, and you don't really do anything else. And so it's a very unique experience. Like, I feel like even a lot of my friends, especially a sport like cycling, where not very many people do it, even in my high school, not very many. I don't think anyone else rode a bike like I did. And,
Yeah.
I didn't even really talk about it because it's kind of hard to explain. So, it's like I didn't really talk about the bike or what I was doing that much.
Yeah. I love this for you, even though I'm obviously just getting to know you, but I love this for you as somebody who, like you said, you have all these thoughts and you never really shared them vocally, but you did think them and you did write them, and they're worthy of being shared. Your experiences with sport, with cycling, with everything is worthy of being shared. And to put in writing and be willing to share that publicly is so brave and so helpful for for everybody, and two, other people who relate to you on that. I think we live in a society, especially with social media, there's loud voices, loud personalities, and it's like other people have things to say too. Who maybe just, I don't want to be on social media like that. I don't like dancing in front of a camera. And it's like, that's okay. There's other important things that need to be said. And so I love for you that you were able to take some of this and put it in a book and be brave enough to put it out there. Because I think there's another like layer that I'm seeing in this is like, with that as you're saying, the life of a professional cyclist can be that like, I'm just a cyclist. It's like, no, you're not. There's so much more to you. There's more to you as a person, and you can have 2 identities. You can have 6 identities. I can be, an athlete and a thinker and a writer and a poet and a great friend and a dog lover. I don't know if you're a dog lover, but just saying, just expanding on that. There's more to us. And I think that's really important. Again, getting back to things like even our identity as an athlete, when our heart does get broken by the sport, when we're questioning that identity, it's really important for us to recognize there's more to us than just that, and to maybe explore that and challenge ourselves in other ways too. And it sounds to me like writing was a way for you to express that throughout your life, that there is more to me, even if I'm not necessarily sharing that with other people. You knew that.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, it's so funny now to think back that, like, so also, say under 23, I felt a huge amount of pressure to be really active on social media, to take pictures of everything that I was doing, to try to get sponsors.
Yeah.
And
like the way of the world these days.
Yeah. The examples that I saw of, women who were professional there was a very narrow, like, okay, you've got to look good. You should probably put some makeup on. You should do your hair. Like, you got to do selfie videos, you got to talk to people, you got to kind of be on 24/7. And I just didn't operate like that at all. And I always knew that I had things to say, but it didn't really click for me until I had to really think hard about my relationship with the sport. And I kind of fell in love with riding again, and I fell in love with writing again. Because during college, I was so busy that I actually stopped writing poetry, pretty much. I was reading for school, and I was writing for school.
Yeah.
And I was training, and I was trying to keep my head above water.
Yeah. You don't have extra time to just write for fun. Yeah.
So it took some time for me to get to this place too. And I think I wish I'd known that sooner, like that I just had to be patient and I would kind of figure myself out. Because I also felt, my whole undergrad, like 4 years, like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I was studying writing, which was great, and I was learning a lot. And I was traveling all across the US racing, and I had these amazing experiences. But I still wasn't sure, like, what kind of job I want to do, what kind of career I want to have. Like, I'd almost, like, learned enough about writing to just figure out what I didn't want to do.
Which is important, but you're still lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the main thing that I seemed to get out of studying writing was that anything that was related to poetry was still what I was best at. We still got the best reactions from the professor, from classmates. But then I was still kind of stumped after that. I was like, okay, but you can't actually be a poet. Can you?
Yeah.
And I just had this in my head, you can't make money doing that. And who cares? Who would care,
Mm-hmm.
But so there was a real reckoning after that. I graduated and I started working in social media, which you can probably guess, even though we've only been talking about 24 minutes, that's not a good fit for me.
Yeah, you didn't like it. You didn't like it.
I didn't like it at all.
Mm-mm.
And then so that forced me to think too. It's like, okay, well, maybe I didn't think poetry was going to work, but this isn't working for me either.
Yeah, it's like doing what you think you're supposed to do or expected to do, or just because other people are doing it. You still have to find what you want to do, what you enjoy doing. And I feel that, especially in today's society, I do feel that so much is like, I don't know what I'm feeling this pressure too. You have to establish yourself on social media. You have to have that presence. It's like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
Don't. Anyways, not about me, but I get that. I get where you're coming from. It's like, that's not a fit for me. Just because everybody else is doing it, that's not a fit for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, now it's really nice, I think, for writers is Substack, which I haven't totally gotten into yet, but it's like another avenue of like, okay, you can do your own thing, how you want to do it, get it directly to the people who are interested in it and want to pay for it. And you could potentially make a living, or you could make some decent money doing something that you really enjoy.
Yeah.
Because print media is in a very difficult spot right now. I'm still, I'm thrilled about the book. I love the book, but selling books is hard.
Mm-hmm. It is. Yes. And just another reason I wanted you to come on the podcast so we can get all of our listeners to go out and buy your book, get into reading. We're going to get more into the book in just a moment, but just get back into reading. And also remember there's more to athletes and sport. Like I just kind of think you're such an inspiration on that aspect of like, you can be a high level athlete and be amazing at something else like poetry and pursue that passion and turn it into something real as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so more people will be buying the book. But yeah, print media is a product of our times, I suppose, right? That's struggling there a little bit.
Yeah.
So at this time in your life, I'm really good at poetry, got a job in social media. Don't like that. That's not a fit for me. Is this coinciding with the time period of like when cycling was also breaking your heart, or sorry, just kind of bring me back on a timeline here of your cycling journey as well as the poetry journey.
Yeah. So the reckoning for both of those happened at the exact same time.
Okay.
Luckily, I was given like a month break from my social media job. There was some drama and they just decided that everyone's going to stop working, but we're still going to pay you.
Okay.
So I was like, awesome. But then I was like, what the heck do I do with myself? You know, it was kind of like, you know, in the beginning of COVID, people just had a lot of time to think about what they wanted for themselves. And,
Yeah.
you know, there was a lot of people changing careers and starting new sports and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of had that.
Like a true pause in life almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah.
So I kind of had that again. I just had tons of like mental capacity to think about what I wanted to do with myself and not working social media. I was like, oh, definitely not working social media is what I want to do. But I was still trying to figure it out because the social media was great because it was remote, it was flexible, you know, I could train really easily. But, you know, I was even starting to think like, okay, I'm doing this job that I don't want to do so that I can train to do the thing that I really want to do. But I don't even know if I want to do that anymore. So if I'm sacrificing this other thing, but it's like not adding up anymore, like, what should I do? So luckily, it was actually, I think my husband suggested, like, why don't you write about bikes? You've never done that. And I hadn't because I was like, to me, in my head, these two things were so different. They were like opposite ends of my identity. You know, I was like, you know, because writing was so creative and emotional and cycling just was, for so long, was so structured for me. But once I started changing how I was riding and I started prioritizing fun and just going like, okay, what's the most fun thing I can think of to do? Like, let's do that. And they were not easy things. Like, they were hard rides, but it was like the point was either the destination or, you know, I was in Nova Scotia. So it's really windy by the ocean. So we would just like ride straight into the headwind and then flip it and sail back. And it's like, that's fun. Like, we're just going to go as fast as possible. It's going to be hard first, but you know, the point is the fun part.
Yeah.
The point is not like, I'm going to go hard because I need to do intervals or whatever.
Right.
It was a means to something else. So I started really enjoying cycling and I started writing about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually really good.
Yeah.
And it just snowballed. It was like, okay, they do go together. Oops. Like,
I love that. And I definitely understand feeling that distance between two different sides of you and almost fearful of letting those two worlds collide. It's like we step into this box. This is how I am when I'm in athlete mode. This is how I am on the bike. And this is how I am in the other part of my life. You know, maybe only certain people get to see that side of me. I'm not creative in the sense of poetry or writing, but I've even felt that in my own life that I don't know if it's the athlete side. Do we have a stereotype in our head of what we think an athlete should be? And it is that structure, discipline, that like fierce competitiveness. And yet in my personal life, you know, I don't know, I have a very emotional, soft side. I grew up going to school in a real hippie town, like this real, like I wanted to be in flowy skirts, like barefoot. But then I also wanted to like turn it on and put my spikes on and like growl at you as I was about to get on the starting line of a race, right? Like, so it's like, how can I be two totally different things? Like hippie girl in a skirt barefoot, like about to crush you in a race. And it feels like, oh, these, like I have my hippie friends and I have my athlete friends, like these two different sides of me. But again, like I think as I grew, I kind of learned, hey, when I bring that side, when I merge these together, when I bring my free spirited side into sport, I have more fun with sport. Sounds a little bit like you, like writing, very emotionally driven for you. When you started bringing your emotion into sport, how can I have fun? What's the most exciting ride today? And letting that like fun emotion drive the sport. and then start writing about it, it all made sense again.
Yeah.
And so I definitely resonate with what, again, I don't know if I don't know if I feel this in any other part of my life quite the same, but definitely that athletic side. And then and then the other identities of me that it's like almost hard to combine sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think now there's a lot more examples of professional athletes, specifically women, having different sides to them, whether it's feminine or they have this other hobby, like Allison Jackson loves to dance. And like now that's a thing. And I think, I almost hate to say it, but I think social media helped that because people could show different sides of themselves. But,
Yeah.
For a long time, it was just, okay, you're an athlete and that's all you are. And like, you should be pretty too, but that's it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it hurts people, and I think we're learning that. And I actually I started having this conversation with another guest of ours, but then we kind of didn't go down the rabbit hole. So I think it's worth going down the rabbit hole with you, that female athletes specifically are doing a great job of expressing the other sides of them. And I think it is exactly not only what, is helpful to the world, but I actually think it's what helps them become better athletes because they're being their true selves. And because I think as women, and I'm not saying this is not the case for men. I'm just not going to speak for men. I'm speaking for girls and women that we are emotionally driven beings. And when we let our emotions be a part of the situation and like embody our full selves and our full authentic selves and express ourselves fully, then I think we're expressing the best version of ourselves. So if we're only being an athlete, we're not expressing all of ourselves. And that creates a really narrow window that we're not having fun with. We're not enjoying anymore. We're not finding success in. We bring other parts of who we are into that equation. We feel more fulfilled. We are just our truer selves. And then we're better athletes in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I used to also, the Olympics are on. I'm thinking about the Olympics a lot, thinking about how I used to think about the Olympics, because I dreamed about the Olympics when I was younger. I didn't know what sport it was going to be, but I definitely wanted to go to the Olympics. Mm-hmm. And I'd always heard like, same with, make sure you have fun is like, you should have something else going on in your life so that you're a well-rounded person, an athlete. And it's like, it was like, blah, like that feels like just a distraction to being the best athlete that I can be. But
yeah,
it truly is. I think it makes you more resilient because you have something else to be proud of.
Yeah.
And when your sport isn't going well, I mean, the classic, people say, if you're injured, you can do something else, which I hate that too. I wrote this to you that I have been injured most of this year, like honestly, for pretty much 6 months straight with different injuries, chronic things, issues coming back, just lots of problems, life stress. I was immigrating into the US. That's the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, the identity of being an athlete is so fragile because if you're not performing, suddenly you don't have anything else. And that can be really devastating. I mean, I've felt that. And actually, one of the things, I don't know if I wrote it in the email, but that I got to thinking about this year being injured and having to accept, like, I'm not where I want to be. I'm not doing the raises that I wanted to do. I'm not, anywhere near the goals that I had. And the recovery or the process to getting back to that is much longer than I anticipated. And I have to be much more patient. And, it's not even going to be in the same season that I'm going to be able to come back. Like, I was racing criteriums and now I'm like, okay, I'm just going to focus on the cross season. And, like that was a month ago. So that was me thinking, okay, I'm, 2 months, like we're just going to move on. And the fact that I was able to wrap my head around that and not just completely fall apart, to shift and say, okay, I'm just going to have this goal now. I would not have been able to do that 3 years ago. I would have lost it that I could not do what I've been planning to do all year. And especially, the goals that I used to have, like qualifying for, international projects, qualifying for world championships. I remember not qualifying for world championships and being absolutely devastated. And just like, there are other things out there that can make you happy. Even if, writing is one thing. I've said that when I write something that I feel is like really, really good, I almost feel like I want to race. Like, I feel incredible. Like, the creative flow is so beautiful.
Yeah.
But never mind that, like, just a different discipline of the same sport, or something slightly different can still make you happy. You just have to get your head on straight.
Yeah. And I think, you were saying when there's certain, this as somebody who appreciates writing, the power of words and how you phrase something can make it, a sentence versus poetry. That's the power of words. Something that just said something versus something that meant something, right? Or something that felt something as you read it. And I think when people say things too, like, oh, you're injured, just focus on something else. Like, the way that is phrased, and I feel you on that one too. That angers me. That's angered a lot of my clients, a lot of my other athlete friends. It's like, it just doesn't work like that. Right. But, and maybe this is unique to everybody. We have to find a way to reframe your mind, find different words, because that is the answer is there's more to you. Find something else to make you happy, but we have to say it in a different way or find the words that make this resonate with you. Right. So it's, I can't think of a way to say it right now, but it's just like embrace this time to dig deeper in another area. Find a way to say it that does get you excited. And for you, it was like, oh, dive into my writing more and feel that more and changing the way you think about it. And I think using different language can help you with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wrote about being injured, and one thing I really like to do with my poetry is if I'm struggling with something, I need to use humor to fight it. So kind of like point out how ridiculous it is, how crazy it is, how frustrating, whatever, and just find a way to laugh at it, because that's how you can kind of break that and shift your mindset. Like the first injury I had this year was a knee injury. I had tendonitis in my knee, and I had never had tendonitis before. So I was like, oh, it'll be like 3 days and then I'll be fine.
Not the case.
And it was not the case. And, it was like, okay, I'll give it 1 week. And then I was like, okay, I'll give it 2 weeks, and then it'll be fine. Like, I was just willing it to be better. And it took 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But writing about that frustration helped me so much. And that's one of my favorite things that I've written. I wrote a poem about my knee and about being injured, and, calling your physiotherapist and saying, okay, I'm feeling this, and this. And if I think about it a lot, it just hurts more. What do I do?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people have that experience. And so being able to connect difficult experiences with other people and writing helps you do that.
Mm-hmm. I actually encourage a lot of my clients who are coming to me for nutrition advice and struggling with something, right? They're going through a time period of struggle pertaining to their nutrition and health. That's why they're coming to me as a dietitian. And I encourage a lot of them to write. Look, you don't have to become a poet. You don't have to become an author. But I think just the process of writing really helps you. Like, we can think, when we think in our head, these thoughts ruminate and go in circles. When we put it on paper, it organizes them in a way that helps you truly process through the situation and the emotion, because it organizes your thoughts. It's like we have so many thoughts going on in our head at one time, you can't even count them. When you write it, it becomes clear. So again, you may or may not become a published author like Mackenzie, but I think the act of writing when you're going through something challenging is incredibly helpful tool for anybody. And again, from my clients that are struggling with nutrition, many of them are injured and working through their nutrition during injury. And that piece of identity as an athlete that we were talking about before is a struggle, and writing yourself through that is so, so helpful. So I strongly recommend people, just, and I always start with like, and maybe this is the girly side of me, again, talking about different identities. Like I'm competitive, but you know what? Some parts of me are girly, and the part of me that says, go buy a cute notebook to get you excited about writing, right? Like go pick one out that's got a design on it that you like and gets you excited to say, I want to open this up and write in it. That's a tip that I, as a dietitian, I'm giving my clients that tip all the time. Go out and get a really cute, pretty notebook.
Yeah, no, totally. Even Molly and I have talked about that. I remember having a conversation one time about the book, and she's like, how are you doing? And I was like, I just got new notebooks. And she was like, yay. And I also I'm just funny. I'm not super girly. I actually, I was a tomboy forever, but I love colored pens. I'm like, pick what color, and I have a nice notebook, and it makes a difference. I don't know. It's nice. You just get excited to do it.
Yes. And embrace that. Again, I think this is I just feel like pointing this out again too, those identities that we can feel are so conflicting sometimes. A lot of us female athletes have been that way. No, I'm a sporty girl. I'm a tomboy. I like getting dirty. And it's like, you're still allowed to like pretty notebooks or colored pens, or, maybe you like red lipstick. Maybe you wear sneakers 90% of the time, but that one day of the week you put heels on, it makes you feel good. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, you're still allowed to express that. And, anyways, a little bit of a tangent, but again, those are pieces of our identity that are important to express and bring into your sport, because it helps you like be, again, that well-rounded person in air quotes that we find this tension towards for some reason. It really is exactly what fills us up as well.
Yeah.
So amazing. So writing through your injury was so helpful, and then also is now helpful to other people because it is a shared experience.
Yeah. And I think I realized a lot of the things that I was writing about that I thought were super specific to either being an athlete or being a cyclist or being a high performance athlete, was not this niche thing that I thought it was, that it was actually a lot of people could relate to it. And that's one of the most beautiful things of writing this book and sharing it is getting reactions from people. And one of my favorite reactions is people saying, say something like, I don't like poetry, but I love your book because it's accessible. I write in a very conversational style. I like to say that it's a lot more like spoken word than literary poetry that you have, that you studied in high school and you have to figure out what the meaning of it is. It's like, no, I'm telling you exactly what I'm saying. It's not, you're not supposed to study it. You're supposed to read it and understand it quickly and hopefully laugh or smile or smirk or something.
Yeah.
I've gotten people who were cyclists tell me, I like the poems about cycling, but what really got me was the poems that were not related to cycling at all, that were just emotions, that were just thinking about life. Yeah, which I thought was amazing because, it's like then, because I think writing about cycling got me back into poetry, but it's, directly connecting to the emotions are what, why I wrote in the first place when I was a kid.
Yeah, like it's all, whether you're a cyclist or not, it's like this is human experiences.
Yeah.
That we're sharing that we can connect on. Yeah, you thought, this one about cycling, is only for cyclists. No, a lot of other people are connecting on that level in their own lives.
Yeah.
And shared, really just a shared experience and the feelings that come from reading those words.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the most beautiful reactions that I had was actually from my grandmother about the poems that were about dreaming.
Yeah.
She said she wished that she'd had that when she was a teenager, that she had my book when she was a teenager.
Mm. That's really meaningful.
Yeah. And we had never had a conversation like that before. We never talked that deeply about, about that kind of stuff. And I was just blown away. And now she tries to give the book to as many people as possible, which is amazing. She's also sold tons of my book.
How cool. And your relationship with her has like grown in a new direction now because you're sharing that. So writing, this is so beautiful. And so writing about cycling got you back into poetry, but it was also kind of, I feel like it was finding the emotion in sport allowed you to dream big again.
Yeah.
And, get back into sport because this was all happening at a time where we're kind of lost career-wise, not knowing what we're doing, and we're lost cycling-wise. It's not fun anymore. And it's like, okay, and it felt like two separate things. Like I have this emotion in poetry, but I can't bring that over into my sport life. But you brought emotion into sport, and then you started writing that emotion, and these two things became tied together. I'm a very handsy person, if you haven't been able to tell. And unfortunately, this is an audio podcast, but people envision my hands separated and coming together.
Yeah. No, totally. It saved me. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but at the same time, then you started battling injuries and your work. So I would love to hear from you in like it's like real life happening. It's like you fell in love with sport, but then you found the fun and emotion again. And then you start writing about it, but then you're dealing with injury. And it's like writing about the injury helped you process it. But it's also still very hard as you've been injured most of the year. It's like, well, kind of circles back to the question of like, what are we doing here with our sport? Are we still dreaming big? Are we still going to sign up for the races? Like what's next there athletically? Or are we still trying to just, I don't know, share?
Yeah.
Are you willing to share that a little bit? Like what's,
the whole reckoning, the realization, I learned what I need to do to be the best athlete that I can be. Like I figured it out. It was years of, kind of felt like I was going blind. Like I would show up to a race and I had no idea whether it would be good or not. Like honestly, it was like 50-50. It was like, I don't know how this works. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's just what's happening.
Yeah.
But I feel like I really figured it out. I know what I need. I know how much time it takes to get there. So even though I haven't been racing, I have this confidence that I can get there as soon as I'm healthy enough for long enough. I know that I can do it. And I don't feel this rush that I used to have or this pressure that I'm running out of time. Because I felt that a lot, especially as an under 23. Like, you've got to get these results so that hopefully you can get on a team before you're elite. Because if you don't do that before you're elite, everything's going to be harder. And you're just not going to have as much support. Like the chances of getting a result that will catapult your career are much lower. Like that's just the reality. But I know that I can still compete at a level that makes me happy and satisfied and feel successful now. And I don't feel the rush. Like I know how to do it. So last year, actually, before I was injured, I did a lot of really cool things. I did my first mountain bike stage race, which I'd never done that before because I thought that was crazy. That's way too hard. I can't do that. I did that and I did it really well and I enjoyed it. I did really well at Canadian Mountain Bike Nationals in elite. I was top 5, which was incredible. And I started racing criteriums. I did something new. I started to really enjoy that. This was probably the most crazy, and what started the injury cycle is I did cyclocross. I did a lot of cyclocross at a really high level. And I also did Zwift Academy at the same time.
Yeah, I didn't know what that was until I was researching this conversation with you. And I came across that. So,
yeah. So Zwift
so
Academy is basically you ride on a stationary bike, and you basically have like a programmed power test that goes to the trainer. And it's basically max effort every time. It just gives you a bunch of intervals, and you have like 6 weeks to do 10 sessions or something. So it's difficult anyway. But I was racing cyclocross at the same time. So I was on the limit of, what my body can handle before it starts to break down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a lot. It was really cool. I finished Swift Academy.
Yeah.
That is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life.
Wow.
And I like to say it's one of the hardest things, even though the mountain bike stage race was also one of the hardest things I've ever done. But the difference is Zwift Academy, you're in your living room. You can stop.
Yeah. So mentally, that's a big challenge. Yeah. To keep
going. Because you can just get off.
Yeah.
When you're in the wilderness on a mountain, you can't stop. You can stop for a little bit, but you're going to have to finish it because you're out there.
Yeah. You have to get home.
Yeah. And you can do it slow, but it's just going to take you longer. So you just got to do it. So they're very different, but they were also very similar. But anyway, I did that. One of my goals for a cross season was to qualify for World Championships, which was a long shot because I only gave myself basically one race to qualify. But there were other races, but I basically only left, put one on my calendar that, okay, I'm going to go do this one. And if I do it well enough, then I can go to Worlds. If I don't, it's not happening. And I did qualify for Worlds, which was also a whole other amazing thing because at the mountain biking kind of broke my heart for a little bit. And I wasn't sure if I would ever go to another World Championships again. I kind of accepted that maybe that part of my life is over.
Yeah.
And I was kind of okay with that. But then I got really excited about cyclocross. And I qualified. I wasn't able to go because I decided to immigrate to the United States right after that. So then I couldn't leave the U.S.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't go.
Oh.
But I had it in me. I was like, I qualified. I was on the team.
Yeah. So you know what you did.
Again, I'm like, I did it once. I know I can do it again. So
yeah,
that's my goal this year. I want to qualify for Worlds and I want to actually go.
Yeah. And I think that confidence in your, when we're younger, we have injury. Maybe we haven't had enough experiences to have that confidence versus now it's yeah, I'm dealing with these injuries and I'm processing through it through writing. And I know there's other things that make up my identity, but also I have that confidence that I did it. I know how to do it again. And I think that's so inspiring of just, having that confidence in yourself that you can, this injury is just part of the story. It doesn't have to be the end of the story. It doesn't have to be if you don't want it to be, right? We can have that confidence in ourselves in other avenues. So yeah. Interesting. So that's, So
that just reminded me of another quick little story of how powerful confidence can be. Because there was one UCI cyclocross race that I did that I think it was, maybe I gave myself 2 chances to qualify. It would have been more of an automatic qualification, but I would have had to get a top 10 and it would have been extremely difficult because I didn't have any UCI points. So I was starting at the back, but I believed I could do it so much that I raced like I was going to get there. I raced like I had wings. It feels surreal to think about it. And I actually just missed getting a top 10. But the way that I raced, because I believed that, I could not have raced that way otherwise. If I had not just had that idea stuck in my head that I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
It allowed me to do so much more than I would have otherwise. Yeah.
And I think what a testament to that, it's not always about, winning the thing, or it's just, if you have that confidence and believe in yourself so much, and you'll go so much further than you would have otherwise.
Yeah.
And the fact how you felt in that moment too, or in those moments of the race were exhilarating. and reflecting on it now, something you're saying it with a smile because you're so proud of what you did, which is awesome.
Yeah. And it was fun.
Yeah.
And it was fun too.
Another theme of what we're talking about, how to bring the fun back in, right? So that confidence in yourself makes it more fun too. Mackenzie, I'm looking at the time and realizing that I just can't believe an hour has gone by, actually. Because I really have enjoyed, I think just honestly, like thinking quite deep and pulling this all together. And because it's one of those things too, it's like, we don't want to sit here and read off the story. We want people to go get the book and have that experience themselves. So sometimes it's hard to talk about it without talking, specifically giving it all away, right? But thank you so much for digging into your story and what made you write the book and finding your own path and these two sides of you, bringing them together and falling back in love with sport and with writing kind of at the same time. So beautiful. But yeah, I'm looking down at my notes and I'm like, oh, we were supposed to do a little Q&A nutrition segment here. So, and I always say when I have guests like you on, I mean, guests like you meaning like we're focusing on your athletic journey and your book, but I usually do try and, sprinkle in some nutrition because as an athlete, you have some nutrition to share, whether it's as simple as this is what works for me or these are lessons I've learned. And yeah, an hour has gone by and we've hardly talked about it at all. But what was funny in our emails prior to this, you actually had a nutrition question for me. And I said, well, if you're willing, maybe we could talk about it on the show. And, there's many podcasts that do kind of like ask the dietitian a question. And I was like, I've never really done that. So let's do that with you. So we're going to kind of finish out with that. And it's not a question that's just like how many grams of protein are in 3 ounces of meat that I just have an answer for you. It's something to kind of talk through. Let me first ask you, do you have a little bit more time to go over this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and if you're willing to just kind of rephrase your question to me and yeah, we'll see what I can help you with.
Yeah. So I know as an athlete, it's really common to have a high metabolism and, athletes, it's a big topic to talk about keeping on top of your fueling. But I would say that, not being a nutritionist, that I fuel myself very well.
Yeah.
I always try to make sure I have carbs, protein, veggies at every meal, lots of snacks. I bring snacks everywhere, but I bonk really easily. And I don't even have to be training to bonk. Wondering if you have any advice for that.
Yeah. So, and I find this a lot with athletes. We've got generally good nutrition practices. And this is where, as much as I like to not be too disciplined, I'm not that disciplined of a person when it comes to nutrition. I love intuitive eating. But sometimes with sports, we do have to dial in and really look at how many grams of carbs are we really getting? Because when you say bonk, carbohydrates is where my mind is going first. I would look at what is our total grams of carbohydrate in a day? Is it enough? And then maybe it is enough, but what is it specifically pre and during that workout or race? Those are the first two things I'm going to look at. So I'm not a big calorie counter or gram counter. And there's a lot of reasons I actually recommend people don't count their grams or count calories. It can lead to a lot of disordered eating behaviors, but it can also be eye-opening. Something as simple as, yesterday I ate 350 grams of carbohydrate, and then you hire a dietitian. It's like, I really need to be eating 500, or I really need 600. Wow, okay, so I need 1.5 portions of this carbohydrate. You might be having a balanced meal, but is it enough carbohydrate?
Mm-hmm.
And so that, I would first look at that. And I'll just kind of ask you, is that something you've ever looked at? Like how many total grams of carbohydrate you're getting in a day or in your pre-practice or anything like that?
No, I don't count carbs. The only time I keep track of carbs is like during a ride.
Yeah. So because again, with bonking, what's happening is your muscles are requiring more glucose. And they're pulling energy and glucose directly from your muscle site. And as that begins to dwindle, we pull it from our bloodstream. Our bloodstream has a really small amount of glucose in it. And pulls back up from our liver, which is still not very much either. So that's where we often say have during training fuel, eat your carbs, have a bar, have some gels or chews or sports drink while you're on the bike to replenish your blood sugar. But it might actually start, the very first step is, do we have enough stored glycogen and carbohydrate at our muscle site? And if you're not eating enough carbohydrate all day long, you might be just starting with a lower amount of muscle glycogen, which means you tap into your blood sugar sooner, which means you bonk sooner and need to refuel, with that during training carb sooner. So again, and this is where if you're not comfortable or don't want to be hassled with counting grams of carbohydrate, you can have a dietitian look at that for you. And we can talk about that later. Yeah. Where, you track your diet, whether it be pictures or writing it down. And I look at how much you're eating and see if that is the problem. Now, we'll move on to the next thing. The next thing is total grams of carbohydrate in a day, and then how much specifically pre and during. And, we have some sports nutrition guidelines to say things like have 60 grams of carbohydrate pre-practice, pre-workout. But it's like, if I'm bonking, maybe I need 80 grams. Maybe I need 100 grams. And we can start just kind of experimenting with that. So if you have a few regular go-to meals or snacks before a workout, maybe we're just experimenting with adding a little bit more carbohydrate to it. That would be the second thing, is specifically your pre and specifically your during. I usually have, 20 grams of carbohydrate in my sports drink over this hour. And it's like, well, maybe you need 40 grams. So we do challenge. If it's truly that I'm bonking, it's probably going to be total carbohydrates. And we just got to look at, is it in your whole day or in this pre or in this during, that we need to experiment increasing. As a next thing though, if you do look at grams of carbohydrate and it's like, no, and a dietitian is like, oh yeah, you are eating enough. There's some other things we could look at. One thing that came to mind is something like reactive hypoglycemia, which is where I did eat enough carbohydrate. It made my blood sugar increase, and then my blood sugar quickly dropped and decreased. And we can figure that out through some testing, maybe a little bit of blood work and a little bit of just experimentation as well, where we might come up with a pre-race meal that has a certain amount of carbohydrate, but also balancing it out with some protein and fats to kind of slow that blood sugar from rising. We don't, everybody's body works differently. It's like, we don't want a blood sugar rise and then quick drop. That's the bonk. Yeah. But we do need enough blood sugar to keep us going, and what's going to help it stabilize. And that's usually where some proteins, fats, and fibers come into play. And again, as a sports dietitian, sometimes we don't want too much fat or fiber in a pre-race meal. That might upset your stomach. But for some people, specifically those struggling with reactive hypoglycemia, you do want some because you don't want the crash coming. That might be another thing that's going on. Is any of this sounding like might be what's going on or giving you some ideas?
Yeah, I do feel, so I have to eat a meal before I go training. And then I have to go training pretty soon after that, before I need to eat again. Like, it's really annoying. So yeah, I'm thinking that it might be, something else. And I do eat a lot on the bike too, which is also really annoying if you're riding with other people or you're going kind of hard, like trying to eat on the bike all the time can be difficult.
Yeah. And, again, there might be something else going on, but I also just want to share that sometimes the amount of fuel that is required to keep up with someone at your athletic level, it is overwhelming. Because it is like, this is a lot. And this is where we have to really find techniques of real nutrient dense foods so that we are getting enough in like the least hassle possible. And it's hard. And it feels like a second job. It's like being an athlete is one job, but eating to be an athlete feels like a whole second job. Yeah. How often it has to happen or how much you have to prep and prepare the food. So some of this, again, I'm not saying there's not something else going on, but some of this we do want to normalize that most athletes should be eating probably every 2 hours. Someone at your level is going to be eating often, and you're not alone in finding that annoying. Yeah. I've definitely like, this is exhausting. I don't feel like eating anymore. And again, this is where sometimes it's like, okay, well, can we drink some? This is why I ultimately, at the end of the day, I am a big fan of carbohydrate-based sports drinks, because it's like, well, we can kill two birds with one stone of and I'm not talking like the little tablets that give you like a few grams of carbs. I'm talking ones that are like have 25 to 50 grams of carb per 8 to 16 ounces of
Yeah.
drink, like something like really made for athletes, not the general public. So I am a big fan of the beverages that you can sneak in carbohydrates in as well, just to hold you over a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I started doing that a lot more because it's so hot here in Georgia that especially eating in the summer can be difficult, or eating enough, especially late in the ride when your stomach's just not having it anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, I used to try not to use the carb mix because it's really expensive unless I would do like a super long ride or whatever. But lately I take one bottle with 45 grams of carbs plus food. And the bottle really helps me just kind of like even out delay it a little. I don't know if delay it, but like just make it smoother. Like I gradually get hungry instead of like, oh my God.
Sudden drop. Yeah. Well, that's good. It's more stable blood sugar. Blood sugar might be slowly declining, but it's not a sudden drop because you're sipping on that drink the whole time, which is good.
But I still have to eat, like, what I often do is I've been trying to make it bigger, but I usually have a smaller breakfast and then a pretty big lunch and probably like 2 eggs and a full bagel. And then hopefully like max, like an hour after that, go ride. And then I'm still going to have the carb mix. And even if I'm not doing intensity at this point, have the carb mix, and I'm eating every 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah. Quick question for you. Is this somewhat of a new thing since moving to Georgia, or has this been going on for years?
The bonking?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question because I moved to Georgia in 2016 to start school. And at that same time, I was gluten-free. And I was actually newly gluten-free, and I was gluten-free for 7 years. I had an intolerance. And during that time, I became really paranoid about having enough to eat because I could not always have gluten-free carbs available, especially if you're traveling. It's really difficult. So I had that, but I was taking care of myself. I would bring whatever I needed pretty well. Every once in a while I would bonk, but then one day the intolerance magically disappeared. I can't tell you why. I have no idea why, but it did. And now I can eat.
Just so you know, I've experienced that as a dietitian before too. And I always tell people who go gluten-free, if it's not an allergy, I'm not discrediting your intolerance. It is real, but consider the fact that it might change again in the future because it can. Something was going on with your body, some sort of inflammation, and gluten probably became inflammatory at that time in your life. And then as your body healed, the gluten intolerance went away as well. This has happened before.
I've heard that too. It's crazy. And it's amazing because it has a pretty big impact on your life.
Yes. Yeah, it does.
So and then I was able to eat carbs, but I was very sensitive to having enough food. And it took me a while to mentally like change my perspective of like, okay, I don't need to panic that if maybe I don't have everything with me because I can buy something, like that had to become like a new thing. Like, okay, we're out, but I don't have food, but it's okay. I can just grab a sandwich or grab pizza or whatever. Like you can figure it out.
Yeah. And so do you feel that the bonking kind of started happening a little bit more when you stopped being gluten-free, maybe? Or you don't know?
That's a tough question. I actually feel like I was able to feel better once I could eat gluten because it was just easier to eat whenever and eat more. I don't know. And that so my husband coaches me and we've actually talked about that it's possible that not being gluten-free anymore is part of what made me stronger, because it's just so much easier to eat more.
Yeah. And eat
And
enough.
eat enough.
Yeah.
Especially when you're traveling, which I was doing a lot because I was competing.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So one of my thoughts why I asked you about Georgia, although I don't think this is playing a role for you, is simply that actually when you're in more humid and hot environments, we burn through our muscle glycogen faster. So I was just thinking, well, you're originally from Canada, maybe moving to Georgia was just a shock of like, oh, I'm burning through things faster. So for any of our listeners, just keep that in mind. You do burn through muscle glycogen specifically faster when you're in the heat and humidity. So like summer training, you might need more carbohydrates than you do in winter training type of thing. Generally, your story and what you just said makes sense that, oh, when you're not gluten-free, I'm able to eat enough and eat more and get stronger in my training workouts because I have more fuel options available to me. So that's great and probably what is needed. Why the bonking is happening then? These are I'm just brainstorming too. A lot of our gluten-free alternatives, like if you have gluten-free crackers or pretzels or gluten-free bread compared to regular bread, sometimes those are actually higher in some fat and protein because they're not using wheat-based things and the carb. And typically, this is not good for athletes because we need those carbohydrates. I do wonder, maybe your body does need a little bump in fats and protein. So it's good that you can eat gluten again, but maybe we do need to look at, hey, stabilizing my blood sugar so I don't have those rapid rise and drops means I do need a little bit more fat and protein in my diet. And we're not being specific with amounts because I don't know how much we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But I wonder, in a gluten-free diet, typically it is a little bit like the gluten-free product. If you're looking product to product comparison, there's like a gluten-free pasta. It's going to be made from chickpeas. So it's going to be higher protein, lower carb than the regular pasta.
Interesting.
And again, I think as a high-level athlete, you need lots of carbs, but maybe for your blood sugar response, maybe we need we might need to look at those grams of protein and fat in a meal too to keep you more stable.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. So these are some of my thoughts, and we can go ahead and we can chat off air if because I think in this type of situation I would have to look at what does a day of eating look like? How many grams are we getting? What did your workout look like? How many grams do we think you need in a whole day and in this specific time to really dial that in? And I'm a very intuitive eating type of approach towards nutrition. Have fun with it, eat what you like. But when it comes to something as specific of like, why am I bonking? Or my blood sugar's dropping. Those are things that we have to really dive in deep and look at the science of nutrition. And so that's where I would start for you, is we could talk off air about that. And hopefully that gave our listeners a little bit of insight as to kind of, these are our top priorities. How many grams of carbs in the whole day? How many grams of carbs in your pre-workout? How many during? And then what are grams of protein and fat that are balancing and stabilizing our blood sugar while looking at your life history, like what else is going on at the same time, right?
Yeah.
That's where I would start.
Yeah, no, that's awesome and really interesting just to have a first impression of that.
Yeah, first impression, right? Without any specific data. That's kind of where we want to first start investigating. Yeah. Well, fun, Mackenzie. Well, I know that was a total shift in conversation, but that was fun to kind of do that. And we'll keep exploring that. And I hope it was interesting for our listeners to hear as well. And I probably need to start doing that a little bit more on some episodes. Just bring a question to the table. And I think that's a fun way for people to learn and kind of reflect on their own needs too. So this was so much fun. Thank you so much for joining. And we will include links in the show notes to purchase your book. And so people can read it and just resonate, like we said, not only as an athlete, but so much of your poetry is just shared human feelings and experiences. And I think a lot for people to enjoy and to learn and relate to on as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lindsay. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Well, everybody, thanks for listening. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, if you are a true fan of female athlete nutrition, then I would love if you could support our podcast by spreading the word. Share a review on your listening channel. Give us 5 stars. It really helps get the word out and get the show more views to positively impact others. Also, you can support the podcast by joining our Patreon. Head to patreon.com/femaleathletenutrition to consider a donation, or even better, join our membership where you get extra monthly content and perks. We don't want you to simply listen alone. We want you to be a part of a community and a movement of fierce, fit, and fueled female athletes. So patreon.com/femaleathletenutrition is where you can do exactly that, learn more, and join. A huge thanks to our affiliates and partners as well. Once again, Prevenix, Inside Tracker, Orgain, Practice Better, Jen and Carrie. Please go check them out, and their links in the show notes where you can get deals and discounts. Last, be sure that you do more than just listen. If you need help with fueling, it's time to take action. Head to my website to learn more. You can either book a free call with me to learn more about our coaching programs and how we can work directly with you, whether it's the fast track or otherwise. Or you can take our online self-study course, Female Athlete Nutrition. You can literally sign up and gain access right now. You can explore our downloadable products, including the Red S Recovery Guide, High Iron Fueling Guide. Or if you are a coach of a team, check out our brand new Coaches Toolkit for teams. You can also just learn more. We have a blog, a Red S quiz to see if Red S is affecting you. If you need help, I want you to get help fast. Too many girls and athletes struggle with nutrition, but you don't have to any longer. You can rise up with the power of nutrition, take action today in any of these avenues, and become fierce, fit, and fueled. Links in the show notes, and we'll see you next time.